The elevator doors opened just as Sarah Miller laid her only winter coat over the sleeping boy. She froze when she saw Ethan Lawson standing at the other end of the executive hallway. Ethan was the owner of the building, and the child beneath Sarah's faded brown coat was his 8-year-old son Noah. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked. Sarah slowly stood. Her cleaning gloves were still wet, and a trash bag hung from one hand. "He was shivering," she said. "The heat isn't working on this floor." Ethan looked at Noah. His son was curled on a leather bench outside the boardroom, one hand tucked beneath his cheek. A tablet rested on the floor beside him. Ethan had told Noah to wait 10 minutes while he finished an emergency meeting. That had been nearly 2 hours ago. "I didn't know he was out here alone," Sarah said. "I thought somebody was coming back for him." Ethan's face tightened. "I was coming back." Sarah lowered her eyes. "Of course, sir." She didn't say what they both knew. Noah had stopped believing that long before he fell asleep. Sarah adjusted the coat around the boy's shoulders. The temperature outside was below freezing, and she still had 2 buses to take home. But she couldn't bring herself to remove it. Noah shifted beneath the warmth. "Mom," he whispered. Ethan looked away. His wife, Rachel, had been dead for 18 months, but Noah still called for her when he was tired. Sarah's hand trembled above the child's hair. Then she pulled it back. "I'll finish the restrooms downstairs," she said. She turned to leave, but the corner of her coat caught beneath Noah's shoe. Something slipped from its inside pocket. A photograph landed face up on the polished floor. Ethan bent to pick it up. The picture was old. Its edges were worn white from being handled too often. A younger Sarah stood in front of a small yellow house beside a man in work clothes. Between them was a smiling little girl with dark curls and a missing front tooth. Ethan stopped breathing. The little girl wore a silver bird around her neck. He had seen that necklace hundreds of times. Rachel had worn it on their first date. She had worn it at their wedding. She had even worn it the day Noah was born. Ethan looked at Sarah. Then he looked at the girl again. "Where did you get this?" Sarah's face lost its color. "It belongs to me." "That's impossible." Noah opened his eyes beneath the coat. Ethan stepped closer to Sarah and held up the photograph. The little girl's smile was unmistakable now. It was the same smile Ethan saw every morning when he looked at his son. "Why do you have a childhood picture of my wife?" Sarah stared at the photograph as if it had opened an old wound. For several seconds she couldn't speak. Finally, she removed one wet cleaning glove and reached toward it. "Because before she was your wife," Sarah whispered, "she was my daughter." Ethan pulled the picture away. "No." Sarah didn't argue. She simply took a small silver chain from beneath her uniform. A matching bird rested against her chest. "She chose the bird necklace because it looked like mine," Sarah said. "She was 8 years old the last time I saw her wearing it." Noah sat up. The coat slid from his shoulder, revealing a loose button Sarah had repaired with blue thread. He looked from Sarah to the photograph in his father's hand. "That's my mom," he said. Sarah's eyes filled, but no tears fell. "Yes," she answered. "It is." Ethan moved between them. "You need to leave." Sarah nodded once. She took her coat, even though Noah's fingers clung to its sleeve for a moment. Then she picked up her cleaning cart and pushed it toward the service elevator. Before the doors closed, Noah called after her. "Was my mom really your little girl?" Sarah looked at him through the narrowing space. "She was always my little girl." The doors shut. Ethan looked down at the photograph again. On the back, in a child's handwriting, were 6 faded words. "Mom, I'll find my way home." And beneath them was Rachel's name. Ethan brought Noah into his office and locked the door. "Is Sarah my grandmother?" Noah asked. Ethan placed the photograph face down on his desk. "I don't know. But she said Mom was her daughter. People can say things that aren't true." Noah touched the blue thread on the coat's loose button. "She didn't know you were watching when she covered me." Ethan had no answer for that. A few minutes later, his mother entered without knocking. Margaret Lawson wore a gray wool suit and the expression that had silenced boardrooms for 30 years. "I heard there was an incident with one of the cleaners." Ethan showed her the photograph. Margaret's control disappeared for half a second. It was enough. You recognize her, Ethan said. Margaret set the photograph down. I recognize a desperate woman. Her name is Sarah Miller. I know her name. Noah looked up. So she is my grandmother. Margaret turned toward him. She is nobody you need to worry about. The words struck the room like a slap. Noah pulled Sarah's coat closer. Ethan sent him into the adjoining lounge and waited until the door closed. What do you know? He asked. Margaret moved toward the window. Rachel was adopted. You knew that. I knew she had no relationship with her biological family. That was her choice. Was it? Margaret's eyes hardened. Women like Sarah appear when they smell money. Rachel understood that. Ethan studied his mother's face. You've met her. Margaret didn't answer. That silence frightened him more than a confession would have. Downstairs, Sarah was emptying her locker when her supervisor approached. Management says you're suspended. Sarah folded her uniform into a grocery bag. Do I get this week's wages? I don't know. I worked the hours. I'll ask payroll. Sarah nodded. She had learned long ago that poor people were often expected to receive uncertainty politely. When she turned, Ethan was standing in the doorway. Her supervisor left them alone. Why did you take a job in my building? Ethan asked. Sarah continued packing. Because I needed work. There are hundreds of buildings in this city. Yes. You knew Rachel was my wife. Sarah stopped. I saw her wedding announcement 8 years ago. I wrote to her, but she never answered. You could have contacted me. I tried once. When? After Noah was born. Your mother came to see me. Ethan stared at her. Sarah opened a small metal locker and removed a shoebox tied with string. She told me Rachel had received my letters. She said Rachel had a good life and didn't want me in it. My mother said that? She offered me $50,000 to stay away. I didn't take it. Sarah lifted the shoebox. I stayed away anyway. Why? Because if Rachel truly wanted nothing from me, loving her meant respecting that. Ethan's voice sharpened. Then why come here? Sarah looked toward the ceiling as though she could see Noah several floors above them. After Rachel died, I saw a photograph of Noah at the foundation's Christmas drive. He had her smile. So you followed my son? No. I cleaned floors in the same building. That was all. That isn't all. It had to be. Sarah placed the shoebox in his hands. Inside were 26 unopened birthday cards. One for every birthday from the year Rachel disappeared until the year she died. Each envelope had the same name written across it. Rachel. I never planned to tell Noah who I was, Sarah said. I only wanted to know he was safe. Ethan looked at her worn shoes and the medicine bottle in the bottom of her locker. It contained one pill. Why was Rachel taken from you? My husband died at a construction site. 6 months later I got sick. I spent 11 weeks in the hospital, lost our apartment and lost my job. Rachel entered temporary care. But she was adopted. Sarah's jaw tightened. The court said love wasn't enough if I had nowhere for her to sleep. By the time I had a home again, her foster family had moved out of state. Did you stop fighting? No. She took the photograph from him and turned it over. I spent 12 years fighting. Then the records were sealed. Noah appeared in the doorway, still wearing Sarah's coat. He looked at the childhood photograph. My mom used to draw birds, he said. She put them on every birthday card she made me. Sarah closed her eyes. For the first time, one tear escaped. She drew them when she was little too. Noah approached her. Did she like pancakes? Sarah gave a broken laugh. Only if they had chocolate chips. Noah smiled. Me too. Ethan watched something pass between them, something quiet, immediate and impossible to manufacture. Then Margaret's voice came from behind him. Ethan, get your son away from her. Sarah's smile disappeared. Margaret stepped into the room and handed Sarah a termination form. You are no longer employed here. Ethan took it from her. She hasn't done anything wrong. She entered this family under false pretenses. Sarah lifted her grocery bag. I'll leave. Noah reached for her hand. Margaret pulled him back. As Sarah walked away, Ethan noticed one final object inside the shoebox. It was an envelope addressed to Sarah. The return address was Ethan's own house. And stamped across the front were 2 words: "Return to sender." That night, Ethan placed the returned envelope on the kitchen table. The address was correct. Sarah had lived in the same apartment for 11 years. The envelope should have reached her. Instead, it had somehow been returned from a mailbox controlled by the Lawson household. Ethan turned it over. Rachel had sealed it with a small blue bird sticker. Noah sat across from him with Sarah's coat around his shoulders. "Can we open it?" "It belongs to Sarah. Mom wrote it." "That doesn't make it ours." Noah looked at the envelope for a long moment. "Then we should give it to her." Ethan nodded. Before he could stop him, Noah asked, "Why didn't Grandma Margaret want Mom to find her?" "I don't know. Are you going to ask?" Ethan had spent most of his life avoiding questions that could damage the family his mother had built around him. Now his son was asking whether he had the courage to break it open. "Yes," Ethan said. "I'm going to ask." After Noah went to bed, Ethan entered Rachel's dressing room. He had left it almost untouched since the accident. Her perfume still stood beside the mirror. A yellow scarf hung over the chair. In the bottom drawer of her desk, Ethan found a notebook. Most pages contained ordinary reminders, grocery lists and ideas for Noah's school lunches. But near the back, Rachel had written one name repeatedly: Sarah Miller. Below it were dates, old addresses and the number of a county records office. On the final page, Rachel had written, "I think I found her." Ethan sat on the floor. His wife had been searching for her mother while sleeping beside him every night. She had carried the fear alone. His phone rang. It was Sarah. "I'm sorry to call," she said. "Noah still has my coat. I'll bring it tomorrow." "No hurry. Just make sure he checks the inside pocket. The lining is torn." Ethan glanced at the coat hanging over a chair. "You need it? It's freezing. I've been cold before." Sarah's voice was rougher than it had been at work. "Did Rachel ever contact you?" Ethan asked. There was a pause. "Once." Ethan stood. "You said she never answered." "She called me the night she died." The room seemed to shrink around him. "What did she say?" "She asked if I was Sarah Miller. Then she asked if I had a daughter named Rachel." Sarah struggled through her next breath. "I knew her voice before she finished the question. Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know you. And after the accident, your mother said contacting you would only hurt Noah." Ethan gripped the phone. "Where were you supposed to meet?" "At a diner on Madison Avenue." "That's where Rachel was driving?" "I believe so." Ethan had always believed Rachel left the house after their argument. He had been angry that night because she canceled a charity dinner without explaining why. His last words to her had been, "Go wherever matters more." For 18 months, he had assumed his anger sent her onto that road. "Did she mention my mother?" he asked. "No. She only said there had been lies and she wanted to hear the truth from me." "How long did you wait?" "Until the diner opened for breakfast." Sarah's voice broke. "I thought she had changed her mind. The waitress kept refilling my coffee because she didn't have the heart to ask me to leave." Ethan pressed his fist against his mouth. He imagined Sarah sitting alone in a red booth while police lights surrounded Rachel's car 3 miles away. "I learned she was dead from the morning news," Sarah said. Ethan couldn't speak. "I'm not telling you this to punish you," Sarah continued. "Rachel loved you. I heard that in her voice. You spoke for less than a minute. A mother doesn't need a minute to hear when her child is loved." Ethan closed his eyes. Sarah asked him to return the unopened letter. Then she ended the call. The following morning, Ethan confronted Margaret in the foundation's private dining room. He placed the returned envelope and Rachel's notebook in front of her. "You intercepted her mail." Margaret barely looked down. "I protected her." "From her mother?" "From a woman who lost custody of her. Sarah was sick. She was unstable and poor." Ethan leaned forward. "Poor isn't the same as dangerous." Margaret's mouth tightened. "You don't know what people will do when they see this family's name." "No. But I'm beginning to understand what you did to protect it." Margaret stood. I won't apologize for keeping chaos away from my granddaughter. She was my wife. And she was vulnerable. Did you know she planned to meet Sarah that night? Margaret's face changed again. This time the crack in her composure did not close. Ethan stared at her. You knew. Margaret reached for her handbag. A phone slipped from its open pocket and struck the table. Its screen illuminated with a notification from her cloud archive. Among the saved recordings was an old voicemail. The date was the night Rachel died. Ethan pressed play before Margaret could stop him. Rachel's voice filled the room. Margaret, I know what you did. Sarah never asked for money. She never rejected me. I'm meeting my mother tonight, and tomorrow, I'm telling Ethan everything. The voicemail ended, but Rachel's voice remained in the room. Margaret sank into her chair. Ethan stood perfectly still. You let me believe she was driving away from me. I didn't know she would die. But you knew where she was going. Margaret's eyes filled with fear. I was trying to stop her from making an emotional decision. Meeting her mother? Bringing a stranger into Noah's life. She wasn't a stranger to Rachel. She hadn't raised her. That wasn't her choice. Margaret looked toward the closed door. When Rachel started searching, I investigated Sarah. There were eviction notices, unpaid medical bills, and an arrest. What arrest? She stole medication. For herself. For Rachel. Antibiotics, according to the report. Ethan felt sick. You used the worst day of Sarah's life to make her look dangerous. I used facts. No. You used shame. Margaret rose. I built this family after your father died. I protected the company, the foundation, and you. Rachel was kind, but kindness made her careless. Ethan picked up the photograph. No. Kindness made her human. He played the voicemail again. This time, he heard something beneath Rachel's determination. Oh. His wife had not been driving away from their marriage. She had been driving toward the mother she thought she had lost. And Sarah had been waiting. Ethan left without another word. He found Sarah in a laundromat near her apartment. She was sitting beneath fluorescent lights, coughing into a paper towel while her cleaning uniforms turned behind a scratched glass door. She looked surprised to see him. Where's Noah? At school. Ethan sat beside her. My mother knew. Sarah lowered the paper towel. She intercepted the letters. She lied to both of you. Sarah stared at the spinning laundry. What did she tell Rachel? That you took the money and disappeared. Sarah's hands curled in her lap. I never touched her money. I know. She told me Rachel read every letter and threw them away. I know. For years, Sarah had protected herself with the belief that her daughter had made a choice. Now she had to face something both more beautiful and more painful. Rachel had wanted her. Sarah covered her face. Ethan expected anger. Instead, he heard a quiet sound that seemed to come from someplace deeper than grief. She was coming, Sarah whispered. Yes. She didn't change her mind. No. Sarah wept into her hands. People folded laundry around them. Machines rattled. A child dropped a sock. No one knew that an entire lifetime of rejection had just been exposed as a lie. Ethan sat beside her without touching her. After a while, Sarah wiped her face. What was she like? The question caught him off guard. You had the right to be angry. I've been angry for 26 years. I want to know my daughter. Ethan opened his phone. He showed her Rachel asleep beside Noah's hospital crib. Rachel decorating a birthday cake that leaned to one side. Rachel laughing after Noah sprayed her with a garden hose. Sarah watched every video twice. In one, Rachel sang while cooking pancakes. Sarah reached for the screen. That song. What about it? My husband used to sing it to her. Ethan played the video again. For the first time since Rachel's death, the memory did not feel like a locked room. Someone else knew where the song came from. That afternoon, Ethan brought Noah to Sarah's apartment. The neighborhood frightened him at first. The elevator was broken, and the stairwell smelled of damp concrete. But Sarah's apartment was clean and warm. Every shelf contained evidence of a life lived carefully. Repaired lamps, folded blankets, and jars with coins separated for rent, food, and medicine. Noah found a framed drawing of 3 blue birds. Mom drew this. She was 6. Sarah opened a wooden box and removed the matching silver bird necklace. Noah held it gently. Why did you keep yours? Because when Rachel left, I needed to believe 2 birds could still find each other. Noah leaned against her. Maybe they did. Sarah pressed her lips together. Ethan turned away to give her privacy, but she reached for his hand. It was not forgiveness. It was not yet family. It was 2 grieving people finally standing on the same side of the loss. They spent the evening looking through photographs. Noah learned that Rachel hated peas, loved thunderstorms, and once kept a caterpillar in her pocket during church. Ethan learned that she had inherited her habit of humming while nervous from Sarah. Before they left, Noah hugged Sarah. She hesitated only a moment before wrapping both arms around him. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "If your father says it's all right." Noah looked at Ethan. Ethan nodded. Sarah's face softened with a smile so familiar that he almost heard Rachel laugh. For one evening, hope outweighed the years they had lost. Then Ethan's phone rang. Margaret's voice was cold. "The board knows Sarah entered the company to reach Noah. By morning the press will know too." Ethan moved away from the others. "What have you done?" "I'm giving you one final chance to protect your family." He looked back at Sarah and Noah sitting beneath the old drawing of 3 birds. For the first time, Ethan understood that his mother did not mean the people in that room. She meant the Lawson name. The headline appeared before sunrise. "Grieving Cleaner Infiltrates Billionaire's Family." The article included Sarah's eviction records, her arrest, and details from the old custody case. It claimed she had taken the cleaning job to gain access to Noah. That part was true. It left out every reason why. By 8 in the morning, reporters stood outside Sarah's building. By 9, someone had painted "Gold Digger" across her apartment door. Sarah scrubbed the words away herself. Ethan called repeatedly, but she didn't answer. She knew what he would say. He would offer security, lawyers, and money. Those things could remove the paint. They could not prevent Noah from finding the story online someday. At Lawson Foundation headquarters, the board gathered for an emergency meeting. The organization was hours away from approving a housing partnership that would create 300 jobs and open 2 shelters. Investors threatened to withdraw if Ethan allowed the scandal to grow. Margaret sat at the far end of the table. "All Ethan has to do is confirm that Sarah Miller is not part of this family," she said. "Then we can move forward." Ethan looked at the people around him. "You want me to lie? We want you to protect the foundation." "You mean protect you?" Margaret folded her hands. "My private actions are not the issue. Sarah deceived the company to approach a child. She cleaned the building for 6 months and never once approached him. Until last night. She covered him with a coat. Then created a scene with a photograph." Ethan struck the table with his palm. "My son was alone for 2 hours because I forgot him." Silence followed. Ethan looked at his reflection in the dark conference room window. He had blamed Sarah because admitting the truth was harder. She had noticed his child was cold when he had not noticed his child was missing. The door opened. Sarah entered wearing the same faded cleaning uniform. Reporters shouted from the hallway until security closed the door. Ethan stood. "You shouldn't be here. You have 300 jobs depending on that vote." Sarah placed her employee badge on the table. "I resign." Margaret leaned back. "That doesn't settle the matter." Sarah faced her. "No. The truth settles it." She turned toward the board. "I took this job because I wanted to see my grandson. I didn't tell anyone who I was. I didn't ask the family for money, and I never touched that boy until I found him sleeping alone in a freezing hallway." Several board members lowered their eyes. "I made mistakes when I was younger," Sarah continued. "I once stole antibiotics because my daughter was sick and I had $6. I was arrested. I lost my home. Then I lost Rachel. Those facts are ugly, but they belong to me." She looked directly at Margaret. "The lies belong to someone else." Margaret slid a document across the table. It was a permanent confidentiality agreement accompanied by a check for $250,000. "Sign this," she said. "You can start over anywhere." Sarah picked up the check. For one terrible moment, Ethan wondered whether poverty would make the decision for her. Sarah owed rent. She needed medicine. The soles of her shoes were separating. She tore the check in half. I already lost my daughter because people decided money measured love, she said. I won't sell my grandson for proof they were right. She pushed the unsigned agreement back. Then she turned to Ethan. Save the housing project. I'm not denying who you are. You don't have to. Just ask for time before making a statement. That leaves you alone with this. I've survived worse than strangers calling me names. Her eyes moved toward the photograph in his hand. But those jobs belong to families who shouldn't pay for what happened to ours. Sarah walked out before Ethan could stop her. The board delayed its decision for 48 hours, but the damage had already spread. At home, Noah saw the headline on a classmate's phone. He locked himself in his room. When Ethan finally persuaded him to open the door, Noah was sitting on the floor with the family photograph. Did Grandma Sarah do something bad? She made some mistakes a long time ago. So did you. Ethan sat beside him. Yes. You left me in the hallway. I did. She didn't tell anyone. No. Then why is everybody mad at her? Ethan struggled for an answer a child could understand. Sometimes people would rather judge someone's worst day than admit what they did wrong. Noah looked at him. Are you going to let them? The question followed Ethan back to the office. Sarah's coat was folded across his chair. She had left it behind with her badge. One of the cleaners said she had refused a ride and walked to the bus stop. Ethan picked up the coat. In its pocket he found Noah's drawing. It showed Sarah, Ethan and Noah holding hands. Above them Rachel had blue wings. Across the bottom Noah had written, Our family found its way home. Ethan ran for the elevator. Across town Sarah stood alone beneath a bus shelter. Snow collected on her hair and thin uniform. Her cough had grown deeper, but she could not afford to miss the bus or pay for a taxi. Headlights approached. Sarah tried to stand. The street tilted beneath her. She reached for the glass wall, missed it and fell. When Ethan arrived minutes later, a bus driver was kneeling beside her. Sarah was unconscious. One hand still held the old family photograph. The other held an empty medicine bottle. Sarah woke in the hospital the following afternoon. The first thing she saw was her coat draped over the chair. The loose button had been replaced, but Noah had insisted the blue thread remain. He was asleep beside her bed with his head on Ethan's arm. Sarah moved her hand. Noah immediately woke. Grandma? The word came out before anyone could prepare for it. Sarah stared at him. Noah looked worried. Is it okay if I call you that? Sarah opened her arms. He climbed carefully beside her and she held him against her chest. Ethan watched them in silence. The doctor had said Sarah would recover. She had pneumonia worsened by exhaustion and missed medication. Another night in the cold might have killed her. You found me, Sarah whispered. Noah looked up. You found us first. The door opened. Margaret entered carrying a sealed storage box. Ethan stood between her and the bed. You need to leave. I came to return something. She placed the box on a table. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Some were written by Sarah. Others were addressed to her in Rachel's handwriting. Margaret had intercepted them over 8 years, hiding them in the Foundation's private archives. Sarah touched the envelopes without opening them. You kept all of these? Margaret's voice was low. I told myself I might give them to Rachel when she was stronger. Stronger than what? Ethan asked. Loving her mother? Margaret looked at Noah. Please don't discuss this in front of him. He's the person your lies hurt most. Margaret flinched. For once, she had no order to give and no reputation strong enough to hide behind. I was afraid, she admitted. Sarah looked at her. Of me? Of losing control. After my husband died, the company nearly collapsed. Ethan was struggling. Then Rachel became pregnant, and I thought stability was the only thing keeping this family together. So you removed anyone you couldn't control. I believed I was protecting them. Sarah touched the box of stolen letters. You protected your place beside them. Margaret's eyes filled. She looked toward Ethan, but he gave her no rescue. "You will resign from the foundation board," he said. "You will also release a statement explaining that Sarah never requested money and never threatened this family. The scandal could destroy the housing agreement." "No. The truth might cost us the agreement. The scandal came from the lie." Margaret slowly nodded. After she left, Ethan's communications director called. A former assistant had provided records proving Margaret ordered Rachel's letters redirected. Sarah's old caseworker had also come forward. Her original files showed that she completed every court requirement and continued petitioning for visitation until the adoption records were sealed. The picture being painted of Sarah as a manipulative stranger was falling apart. But Ethan knew clearing her name required more than documents. That evening he recorded a statement from the hospital. He did not stand behind a company logo. He sat beside Sarah's empty coat. "My son fell asleep in a cold hallway because I chose a meeting over a promise I made to him," Ethan said into the camera. "Sarah Miller covered him with the only coat she owned. She did not know I was watching." He held up the childhood photograph. "Sarah is Rachel's biological mother and Noah's grandmother. She lost her daughter during poverty and illness, not because she lacked love. Members of my family prevented their reunion. Sarah entered our building hoping only to see that her grandson was safe." Ethan paused. "My family's name does not need protection from Sarah. It needs to answer for what was done to her." He posted the statement without board approval. Within an hour, former co-workers shared stories about Sarah bringing them food, working their shifts and quietly paying for a cleaner's bus fare. The housing investors called the board. They were not withdrawing. They wanted the project to continue, with Sarah's name publicly cleared. Hope returned slowly, not as a miracle, but as the result of people finally choosing the truth. Later that night, Noah helped Sarah open the first letter from Rachel. It described Noah's birth and how frightened Rachel had been to become a mother without understanding her own childhood. The second contained a photograph of newborn Noah. The third was written 2 days before Rachel died. Sarah held it for several minutes before unfolding it. At the bottom, Rachel had written one final sentence. "If I am brave enough to find you, I hope you'll be brave enough to forgive me." Sarah read Rachel's final letter aloud. Rachel wrote that she had spent years believing Sarah had accepted money to disappear. Then she found a copy of Sarah's first letter hidden in Margaret's records. Sarah had ended that letter with the same words written on the old photograph. "No matter how long it takes, you can always find your way home." Rachel finally understood that her mother had never abandoned her. "She didn't need my forgiveness," Sarah said. Ethan sat beside her. "Maybe she needed to hear that. Then we'll say it somewhere she can hear us." 3 days later, Sarah left the hospital. Reporters waited outside, but she refused offers for paid interviews. She agreed to speak only once at the foundation meeting where Margaret would resign. Margaret stood before the employees and admitted what she had done. She did not blame grief, money or pressure. "I believed poor meant unworthy," she said. "Then I used my power to separate a mother and daughter. Rachel died before I gave them back the time I stole." When she stepped away from the microphone, Sarah approached her. Margaret could barely meet her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," Sarah said. "Because forgiveness isn't something you demand from the person you hurt." Margaret nodded through her tears. "But Noah loves you," Sarah continued. "I won't make him lose another grandmother to protect my anger." Margaret looked up. "That does not erase what happened," Sarah said. "It means what happened will not decide everything that happens next." Ethan removed Margaret from all authority over the company and Noah's trust. She would have to rebuild her relationships without money, titles or control. The board approved the housing partnership unanimously. Then Ethan announced an independent program to help parents navigate medical crises, temporary foster care and family reunification. He asked Sarah to advise the program. She shook her head. "I clean offices. I'm not qualified to run a foundation." "You spent 12 years reading court filings without a lawyer," Ethan said. "You know every place the system can break a family." Sarah agreed to consider it, but only if it became a paid position with real authority. Ethan smiled. That sounds qualified to me. After the meeting, they went to the diner where Sarah had waited for Rachel. They sat in the same red booth. Noah ordered chocolate chip pancakes even though it was dinner time. He placed the silver bird necklace beside an empty coffee cup for Rachel. Then he took Sarah's hand. "Mom found you," he said. Sarah looked toward the window. Snow drifted beyond the glass, but this time she was not waiting alone. "Yes," she whispered. She did. Ethan reached across the table. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." Sarah took his hand. "You were grieving too. Does that mean you forgive me? You didn't steal those years." "No. But I almost let fear steal the ones we still have." Noah stretched his arms across the table and pulled their hands together. "So we don't waste any more." Sarah smiled. "What do we do with them?" Noah answered as though it were obvious. "We become a family." 6 months later, Sarah stood inside the Lawson Family Reunification Center, helping a young mother complete an emergency housing form. She no longer cleaned the foundation's offices at night. Now she worked with parents who feared that one illness, one missed paycheck or one eviction might cost them their children. She never promised outcomes she couldn't control. She promised they would not face the system alone. On the wall behind her hung Rachel's childhood drawing of 3 blue birds. Beside it was the old family photograph. The picture was still faded, but it no longer lived hidden inside a coat pocket. Noah visited after school. He usually dropped his backpack in Sarah's office before searching her desk for snacks. Ethan came too, although never as often as Noah demanded. He had changed in smaller ways that mattered more than speeches. He turned off his phone during dinner. He attended school events. When he told Noah he would return in 10 minutes, he returned in 9. One evening, Noah had a winter concert. Ethan's board meeting ran late, but this time he stood before anyone could stop him. "My son is waiting." He left the room. Sarah was already seated in the school auditorium, saving him a chair with her brown coat. After the concert, Noah handed them a new photograph. It showed the 3 of them outside the reunification center. In Sarah's hands was a framed picture of Rachel. "I'm putting this in the old frame," Noah announced. "What happens to the old picture?" Ethan asked. "We keep both. Families don't replace people. They make more room." Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. "That sounds like something your mother would say." Noah smiled. Maybe she did. That Christmas, Margaret arrived at Ethan's house carrying nothing but a plate of cookies. She no longer entered without knocking. When Sarah opened the door, both women stood in silence. Margaret had apologized publicly, privately, and in writing. She had begun counseling and volunteered under supervision at a legal aid center. None of it returned the stolen years. But it was the first honest work Margaret had done without expecting control in return. "I can leave," she said. Sarah glanced toward Noah, who was arranging 4 chairs around the dinner table and a 5th beside Rachel's photograph. "You can stay," Sarah answered. "But we don't hide things in this family anymore." Margaret nodded. "No more hiding." Later that evening, Sarah noticed a woman and her young daughter standing outside the reunification center across the street. They had arrived after closing and the girl was trembling in a thin sweater. Sarah walked outside. Without hesitation, she removed her brown coat and wrapped it around the child. Noah followed her. "That's your only coat," he said. Sarah buttoned it beneath the girl's chin. It was. "What if you get cold?" Sarah looked back at the house. Ethan stood in the doorway holding another coat. Margaret waited beside him with a blanket. Sarah smiled at Noah. "Then someone who loves me will notice." The little girl slipped her hand into her mother's and Sarah led them inside. Years earlier, poverty had convinced a courtroom that Sarah's daughter would be better without her. Wealth had later convinced Margaret that love could be managed through money, silence, and locked doors. Both had been wrong. Sarah had entered the Lawson building as a woman nobody noticed. She left her coat on a sleeping child because she expected no reward and did not know anyone was watching. Yet that unseen act exposed a buried truth, reunited a broken family and helped hundreds of others find their way home. The old photograph remained on the center's wall, its edges worn and its colors fading. But beneath it hung Noah's new picture, Sarah, Ethan and Noah standing together, with Rachel smiling between them from the frame in Sarah's hands. Some people believed family was determined by blood. Others believed it was decided by law, money or a shared last name. Sarah had learned that family was something quieter. It was the person who waited all night in a diner. The child who saved you a seat. The father who finally left the meeting. The woman who admitted what she had done. And sometimes, it was the person willing to give away her only coat when nobody was supposed to be watching.